What's going on, podcast listeners? My name is Michael Chernow. I am a restaurateur and lifestyle entrepreneur, and I am truly obsessed with living a life better than yesterday through wellness, fitness, and good vibes. I've always wondered if the drive to succeed is something we are born with, or if it's something that is made over time through grit, drive, and perseverance. I get to answer that question exactly, and the goal of this podcast is to talk with people that have absolutely crushed it in life and have inspired me to do the same. This is Born or Made. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Born or Made podcast. Today, I have an intense guest, a dude you just do not want to F with. That's for sure, especially if he's got a fucking sword in his hand. His name is Race Imboden. He is a U.S. team foil fencer. The guy has taken home medals from the Summer Olympics. The amount of hardware he probably has in his house from winning fencing competitions is intense. He is also a model. He is from Atlanta, but moved to New York City when he was a young dude and somehow, some way found his way into fencing. I cannot wait to get that story from him. I never thought that I would have an Olympic fencer on the podcast, and so I'm super pumped. Ladies and gents, let's welcome Race to the Born or Made podcast. Race, what's up, man?
What's going on, man? Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Why don't you do us a favor and just give us a quick intro? I know that I sort of kind of did it, but I would love to get it from you.
Yeah, I've been fencing my whole life. I was born in Florida, moved to Atlanta really young, and then I was basically in a park playing with a toy lightsaber in Atlanta. Someone came up to my parents, asked them if I had ever done fencing before. They said no, didn't know what the fuck it was. Neither of my parents are fencers. None of them are from there, from that sports history, sports background. I moved to New York City at about 8. I had taken my first lesson in Atlanta, and then it happens that New York is a mecca for fencing. And I kind of picked it up and slowly progressed from there, and then shot up and did my first Olympic Games in 2012 and second in Rio, and was currently on my way to my third.
Wow. So you got started in fencing because you were playing with a lightsaber as a kid and somebody saw your skills and said, hey, this dude needs to be a fencer?
Yeah. It was, you say, born or made. I mean, for certainly somebody saw something. And funnily enough, when I won the Olympic medal in Rio, I got like a random message on Facebook from the guy who had come up to my parents in the park in Atlanta. And he was just like, yeah, I was the guy who told you to start fencing. And it was just a fluke thing. And I think a lot of it is like, stumbling into, I played a lot of sports. I played soccer. I did everything under the sun, ran around. I actually was like under 10 champ in BMX in Florida. Just a lot of I loved getting out there and competing. And then fencing was one of the things that I actually found the hardest to do. Like, it was one of the things that didn't come as naturally to me, and it was hard. And then the concept of it and the beautifulness of the sport, and also just like being a kid and getting the fight with swords for every day for fun, and then eventually for a living is pretty much, you can't beat that.
So you said New York is a mecca for fencing. We share something in common. I mean, you came to New York when you were 8, but that's essentially being raised in New York. That is being raised in New York. I did not know that fencing was a thing in New York City. I really didn't. So that's total news to me. It would, for some way I could totally see it because New York is such a unique place. I mean, there's so many obscure subcultures in New York City that cross so many different genres. Hearing that New York City is a mecca for fencing does not surprise me. But where did you start fencing in New York?
So we moved to New York, and we were living in a little apartment temporarily. And the apartment was right across the street from a fencing club in the mid-20s, so right by Madison Square Garden. And then that fencing club actually shut down. That was my first ever interaction with fencing in a club sense, where there was older guys, people my age looking at different classes. But yeah, just started right in Midtown Manhattan. And then when that club closed down, another club was like on the block behind it, and it happened to be one of the most famous clubs in the world, actually. But it's Fencers Club, originated, one of the oldest clubs in America, if not the oldest. And I got really lucky to be surrounded by a bunch of guys that were training for Athens, and I got to be in the locker room and start my career watching these older dudes that I respected, being men and competing and training for an Olympic Games.
Such a wild sport to play. And I think as a kid, like you said, being able to really get good at sword fighting is incredible. Talk to me about let's break down fencing. Let's break it down.
Mm-hmm.
What is the game? How do you win points? And, how long are matches? I'd love to learn more about it because I don't know much.
Yeah. It's one of the things people don't get. So fencing is a 3-weapon sport. So you introduced me. I'm a foil fencer. We have foil, epee, and saber. They're 3 weapons all under this kind of umbrella of fencing. You compete men and women separately, 4 guys on the national team. We compete individually and as a team. The actual match itself is on something we call it a strip, or a piste in French. It's a long, I think it's about 12 meters. I always get the number wrong, but it's a long, thin strip. I know I've done this long enough. I should probably know those numbers by now. But a long, thin strip, and you're directly in front of your opponent. So unlike boxing or wrestling, where there's a lot of circular movement and side movement, you are locked in front of your opponent. You're either applying pressure or receiving pressure. So it's a 2-way sport, all about change of direction, all about being fast paced. And then obviously the technical side of it is you are given a target area. So in foil, our target area is the torso. You touch the shoulders, the back, the chest, the sides, but anything that is the arm or the head, you don't get a point.
So it's the full torso, 360 to 360 degrees.
360 full torso.
Oh,
so one
so
of the
cool.
things you'll know, yeah. And so, over the years, since it's become modern, the foils are flexible. So you've seen it when we hit, our blade bends. They're made out of a material that can bend. And what it does for us is allows us to actually whip the blades. And so what we've started to do in modern fencing for the last, maybe, I guess it would be almost 10, 20 years now, maybe a little bit more, is we whip the blades to go over your shoulder and touch you on the back. So a lot of the things that you'll do is kind of developing really, really sharp technical skills. And then a lot of it is mentality and mental. How do you perform? We don't have weight classes. You can be completely different. You can fence completely different. Some guys are really aggressive. Some are ultra defensive. And you kind of get to play to your personality. Are you a big, heavy set guy? Are you going to rumble forward? Are you going to be light and quick? Korean fencers, Japanese fencers, Chinese fencers, Russians, French, we all have these styles. And then within those styles, we have personality traits, and you get to kind of explore that and express yourself on the strip.
It's so interesting that you say offensive, defensive. I mean, I'm just, my character in life is to play offense.
Mm-hmm.
I always play offense. I'm an athlete, and I also I'm a solo athlete for the most part. I played sports a lot when I was a kid on teams, but as I've gotten older in my life, I've really been drawn to solo sports, fighting, Muay Thai, long distance running, bodybuilding,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. And so I do believe that people that tend to gravitate towards a specific position in sports, be it offense or defense, tend to actually act out that way in their personal in their character as well in life.
100%, man. 100%. I mean,
are you an offensive player or are you defensive?
I would say it honestly has changed throughout my career. I've had different coaches. I've gone through periods, and I think it's been a lot about my growth and mentality in the sport as well. I've had a really interesting career where I've trained under 3 or 4 different coaches. I've been number 1 in the world with 3 of them. And essentially they all have very, very different styles.
You've been number 1. You're number 1 fencer in the world at a certain point.
I have been, yeah. I won the World Cup, which is being the overall winner of the season. I'm a world champion last year with Team USA. It's the first time we've ever won it in the history of fencing. And then bronze medalist, numerous time World Cup winner, numerous time Grand Prix winner. Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible,
Yeah.
dude. That is
Thank you, man.
so,
Thank you.
I am so stoked to be speaking to a world champion in a
Yep.
sport that has been around for how many years has fencing been around?
Oh God. I mean, the first date, I mean, it depends on what you go back to. It's an ancient sport. It's one of the original sports of the Olympiad. So we know we've been around for a while.
Wow. All right, so let's go back to the offense defense. So you were
Yeah.
number one in the world under 3 different coaches.
Yeah. So, I played the game defensively. I played the game offensively. I played the game extremely offensively. Like, I think as you get older, actually, the guys that are the best are the ones that are able to know all their games and be able to like pick and choose what they're doing based on the opponent in front of you. It can vary throughout the day. You have guys who are the best in the world that have kind of one thing they're really, really amazing at. And that will be like pushing the opponent down the strip, like getting into the back quarter, holding them there, and just like applying pressure from the get, never going backwards. And you have guys like that. And it's interesting to see different people's approach to it. Some people will let them come. Some people will meet them in the middle and never go back and kind of go head to head with it. But at the same time, the beautiful thing about fencing is that it is we call it a physical chess. So the concept is that because it's so technical, if you're rushing, the same as boxing or wrestling, like one slip up and you're going to get a point scored against you. And so what happens is, as you see matches develop, especially as you go later on in the day, you'll see guys kind of, when you see an amazing fighter, or you're watching Muay Thai and someone's fighting a person who's not at the same level as them, it's easy for them to kind of walk forward and tee off and like put pressure, even showboat a little bit. But as you go through the competition, the gamesmanship starts to come out, and those matches where you have to control the distance a little more, you have to control the tempo of the match, I have to kind of take you out of the zone that you want to be in. That requires me to be flexible. And I think the best combat sport athletes, and that's, you said Muay Thai, things for me, like I'm obsessed with combat sports. I relate to them the most. Pretty much other than that, it's individual sports like tennis. But the best guys are the most flexible. Like, we have to go and compete every day. So the only way to win a World Cup or to be number one in the world is to go and win on the day that you're at your worst.
Right.
So how do you do that? If you're always the guy who's coming forward and that day you don't have it, and you competed hard the week before and you flew to Russia and you ate the wrong thing, you're tired, you're jet lagged, something's wrong, you still have to show up and compete. And that's kind of been the journeyman and the thing that I've taken on recently, that I think is the beauty of being one of the best guys, is like, there's somebody who's always doing that. And those are the guys you chase, and those are the guys you try to fend off.
What does it feel like to be training for the Olympics? Like, what does it feel like to have such a massive competition in front of you that the whole entire world is watching, and you're wearing the title of arguably the best in the world? What does that feel like?
Every Olympic Games I've trained for has been so drastically different. The first time I made my Olympic team, I was 19 years old. I was in London. I was the second youngest guy on the entire US team in every sport. So I kind of just rolled in. Like, it kind of came naturally. Like, I just started popping off. I went from being like, a young up and coming fencer to just sweeping and getting on the team and winning all the national competitions, and then making my way to my first world championships, and then medaling the season afterwards. And all of a sudden I'm at my first Olympic Games. And it's like, nothing prepares you for that. As much as you're a kid and you watch it and you work with a sports psych, you have people prepare you for it, there's nothing like getting there and being around every single person that you respect, having all the lights and the money and the action and all the things that you imagine as being an athlete, because we're Olympic athletes. Like, the pomp and ceremony is every 4 years. We have our world championships, we have our things inside our sport, but nothing is like stepping in front of that, walking into a stadium with over 100,000 people in at the opening ceremony, showing up and training in these halls where I'm training fencing, and in the next room you have the wrestlers, and in the next room you have the NBA team, and it's like being surrounded by greatness. when you're a kid, it didn't touch me the same way, because I think that I went in being ecstatic to be there and knowing that I was an underdog. And so it was the easiest games, the first one. We came fourth. We missed a medal by 1 round. And then going into the next games, our team had done way better, but we were still not at a place where we had the same confidence in something. There wasn't a chip on our shoulder yet. We lost to Russia. And Russia kind of after that became our run and gun. Like, it was like the most intense matches. And suddenly Team USA was solidifying themselves as like a medal contender. And the second games we took bronze. We hadn't been a world champion yet.
Is that not something that the US team was somewhat accustomed to? Were they always sort of not up there at the top of the chain?
No. So before our generation, before the generation of 4 guys I'm on the team with, Miles Chamley-Watson, Garrick Meinhardt, Alexander Masialis, and myself, before us, we didn't medal or do consistently well like this group of guys has done. Like, we completely changed the dynamic for at least men's foil in US fencing. There is no one that comes close to us 4 guys pushing each other. It's incredible. It's like, it went from being the guys before us had maybe 1 World Cup medal or 2 World Cup medals. And now you're talking about people with, numerous, I've won maybe 8 or 9 World Cups, or in multiple Grand Prix, and medaled more than that. And then to have Olympic medals and world championship medals. I mean, we are the ones pushing each other. And it's amazing because we're on a team together, and then individually we're competing against each other.
I've got to ask you this question.
I
think because it's a question that, it obviously relates back to the podcast, and I'm so the energy that I have talking to you is intense right now for me, because I could feel speaking to a world champion is intense in itself, but why you? Like, what drive, why are you in the position? Is there something that you wake up to every day? Is there, being able to say you are the best in the fucking world is that's just like a real thing? And so why you?
It's a big question. I think it comes from environment a lot. I had a very unusual upbringing in the sport. Fencing is a very bougie, upper class sport. And I came from a kid from Brooklyn. We moved to the city for my dad's job. He quickly, unfortunately, got laid off. Family went bankrupt, didn't have a lot of money. I started fencing, and it was kind of like someone was telling me no. I started beating the guys in my club. I started beating guys who were older than me in my club, but I wasn't competing anywhere. My parents didn't have the money to send me nationally. We didn't have the money to go internationally for sure. And so they kind of kept me in a cage. It almost was like I didn't go the same route as everyone else. I always had to do it myself. I had to take lessons at 4 o'clock in the morning before school because people weren't allowed to see me getting lessons for free from my coach.
Were you driving you? Were you driving you at that age?
100% me. 100% me.
Why?
If anything, my parents actually told me to quit when it wasn't going well a couple times. I think it was just, there was something wanted to be better. There was a passion for education. There was a passion, and I didn't know it when I was a kid. I loved learning shit about the sport. I loved going in and learning new moves. I loved learning how to tactically take someone down. And then to apply that and dominate a man, especially a guy who's older than you or who was beating you, and to know between me and him in that moment, there's a clear black and white situation. And that's the victor of that day. It's the victor of that match. And you do that every day. You go into the club every day. And that kind of dominance, that kind of thing of testing yourself against people, that has been the thing that I wake up to every day. I love having people come in and fly in and go to the clubs I'm at. I love having intense matches. I'll get into it with you at practice. I'm not a mellow guy. I'm in it. We're going to get into each other's face. It's going to happen.
Does it hurt?
I'm so used to it now. I'm always shocked when I bring people or I let people try it and they're like, man, this shit, it fucking hurts. And I'm like, yeah, I guess you are getting hit. You know what I mean? You'll get cuts and bruises. The worst thing is that the blade breaks and it goes into a sharp point. So the protective gear we wear is mostly to protect us from that puncture.
Got it.
We have had some crazy accidents. The worst is like you'll get it through the hand. The worst ever one that I've heard about is we used to fence in shorts instead of the protective pants, and a guy got it through his sack.
Oh my
Got stabbed through his
God.
sack. Yeah, and after that, I was like,
Oy.
you know what, man, I'm gonna wear a cup for a little while, and I'm gonna wear protective pants because like a lot of us don't. I don't know why we don't, but we just don't.
I guess I'm by no means an Olympic athlete. However,
Yeah.
I've had years of experience in competition, and especially, and I guess I would compare it closest to Muay Thai, because Muay Thai is one of those sports where either you're applying pressure or you're trying not to lose, right? And that means defense.
Yes.
And so for me as a young guy coming up, and I'm not a big guy, I'm 5'8", and probably when I started Muay Thai, I was 140 pounds or something. It was all about getting back up for me. That was it. Like when I got so obsessed with the sport, and I would train for, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours a day because I was so actually obsessed with it. And I think I was like essentially replacing addictions from a life of badness to a life of goodness. But I was obsessed. And the number one thing, and I only can sort of articulate it now, I didn't really think that way then, but I just knew that all I had to do was get back up, and then getting back up became obsessive for me and became an addiction for me. Is that, I mean, is that something that you can relate to, or do you think it's just much more than that? I mean, to get to the level that you're at, it's got to just be your whole entire life, every cell in your body.
No, that's something that I absolutely relate to. Fencing is a losing game at the beginning. We do a tableau competition. It's like tennis, right? So there's no, I go into this open this open competition and I do 2 matches and I walk away and I'm like, oh, I'm undefeated, or I beat this guy, or I like fought people that are my level, right? It's a lot more about testing yourself, especially against people who are older and better than you on a regular basis, getting your ass kicked and being able to take that risk. And I think that's the big one, is that you see in people who have had other issues in life or have struggles, it's easier for them to man up and put it on the line, I feel like. And for me as a kid, like I used to get yelled at by the coach when I was a kid. I would come into the fencing club and I would ask the Olympians training for 2004 to fence. And I was like, 12, 13 years old. I was like, guys, look, let's fence. And I would run it. Like I would try my hardest to beat them, and they would toy with me. And like, eventually I remember one time I got under one of their skin. Like I just managed to like annoy one enough that he showed me a little emotion and actually fenced me hard. And I remember thinking like, oh, that's like a victory for me, And I kind of took it from that position for me, that like, I'm always going to get knocked down until I'm the guy who's winning. And there's always another guy. And so it was weird. It was more weird for me to be in that cage and then be released into like the international circuit and start dominating or beating guys that I thought were amazing, and coming up against dudes that I had been watching on YouTube or like studying their tapes back in the days when we had like DVDs at the club, you know what I mean? Like old school tapes, to get on guard with those guys and then be like, oh shit, I just beat this dude who's like a 3-time world champion. Like I can do this. And I don't look like any.
I want to ask you something. So it's really interesting, right? I mean, so as an athlete, you get to this place where, and I don't know any, and I know a bunch of athletes. I mean, essentially everybody that I tend to associate with today is an athlete of some sort.
Yeah.
Because my life
ends up like that.
Yeah. I mean, my life is I'm not, my life is, I have a whole business life, but really fitness has become a massive part of, if not the most important part of my life next to my family. But like you're like, you work really hard towards something, months and months and months. You're climbing the fucking hill, you're climbing the mountain, you're fucking climbing. It's raining, it sucks, weather, rain, hard, sleet, mud, everything, all that shit. And then you get there, right? And you're there, and it kind of feels like almost like it's not really happening. Like you know, when you're there fighting or competing with these guys that you watched growing up as a kid, like
Yep.
what is and you win.
Yep.
Are you celebrating those wins? Like how are you dealing with those wins?
So celebration was something that I had to kind of learn how to do. I I was always in the mentality that there was something else. So like when I get off the podium, I step off the podium, I take the medal off and I put it in my pocket. I don't wear it around. You know, like I don't my Olympic medal is in a drawer. You know what I mean? It's like it's not on display. It's a weird thing for me. And it's something that as I'm older, I always think about the thing I haven't done. So if I beat the guy who's a 3-time world champion, but I only came into the 8th round of the competition, I didn't win. So it was like, oh, I lost to somebody else, you know, or I did something else, or I need to match this person, or I need to be able to beat them in a better way, or there was always something. So funnily enough for me, that surrealness and the pleasure of fencing came when you were completely in the zone. Anytime that it was a struggle, I was out of that zone. It was like the times when I've been fencing my best and it's just like a blackout, me and you on the strip. There's 2 coaches on either end. It's you and this other guy. And when you get into those matches, the ones that I remember the most are the ones that are just like you're with somebody who's amazing at what they do. And one of the sports psychologists that I work with always says that it's like, remember that every person you compete with now is amazing at what they do. And so that was a lesson for me because I got good quickly. And then I turned around and looked at people that I was beating and I was like, oh, I should be beating these people. And then you start to teach yourself to like, you know, you're not taking any prisoners, but at the same time, you're not celebrating your success. You have, it's like a double, that balance is not there. So I think that's a very interesting thing that you brought up. And I think it's something that you see a lot. I remember reading Michael Phelps' book when I was a kid and saying he had just won the 8 medals. His coach put out a book and it talked about the idea that he came back from his first world championships and won 4 medals, or he won his first, you know, big gold medal. And his mom had a banner on the house and Michael Phelps' coach wouldn't let him get out of the car until his mom took the banner down. Cause he was like, what are you going to do when he wins Olympic medals? You're going to have to do something bigger. And that was kind of the mentality that I had. And I don't know if it was my mother who showed me that book, but that was the mentality in our household, was like, oh no, we're not going to celebrate these little steps along the way. We'll celebrate when you do the big accomplishments.
I asked the question because for the first time in my life, I was training for a bodybuilding competition. It was my second bodybuilding competition. For whatever reason, I kind of fell in love with it. And I said to my coach, I want to be pro. And he was like, all right, you know,
Yeah.
all right. And,
Yep.
and so I worked really hard all year and I had a couple of shows canceled, obviously, because of COVID, but I found a show in September. And I've never really celebrated my wins, you know, like, and a win for me is like beating a time at the New York City Marathon or, you know,
Yep.
like that, you know, but I've never really celebrated them. And I didn't ask myself that question. I didn't even celebrate, like when I opened up, you know, I've opened up 16 restaurants. I just didn't, I've like really not celebrated much, you know what I'm saying?
Don't.
And
I
that
feel like that's a
said,
winner's thing too. I feel like that's a winner's mentality. Like I feel like the common thing is that like we expect it. Like you go into it when you told your coach, I want to be professional. You thought that you could do it, and you thought some part of you believed you were going to do it. And so when you do it, you're like, oh, I did it. Like that's what I thought I was going to do, and I did it.
it's so funny because I
Yep.
had someone with me for the competition because I was like, you know what, I had this really cool person come with me to document it. And I competed and I won my category.
Congrats.
And then thanks. And then they awarded me my pro
Yep.
card. And
Yep.
it was exactly what I wanted to do to the T.
Yep.
Like I should have walked off the stage having won both categories I competed in and been like,
Yeah.
fuck yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
didn't. And I didn't. And
Totally.
when we got back in the car, Also having not eaten anything that was like gluttonous for like 4 months. She was like, she had the camera on me and she's like, aren't you going to fucking celebrate? And I was like,
And you were like, yeah.
you know, I'm like, and then, but so a switch went off in my head. And that's why I ask you, because I feel like at a certain point, right, you live this life, whether it's in business and in sports, in your career as an athlete, like at a certain point, we have to start to celebrate the fucking wins, because it's not only for, it's not actually, in my opinion, it's not even for me. It's for the people around me and the people around you, because if you don't celebrate them, it becomes less, I mean, it's always going to be a monument in your life. But if you don't celebrate them, the people around you don't appreciate it as much, as far as I'm concerned. And so when I a switch went off and I fucking lost it in the car. I started screaming and fucking like, I was like, holy shit, I can fucking celebrate now. If she wasn't sitting next to me, I'd be like, driving back down to New York, you know? And it felt really good to celebrate it. So,
you know, I used to feel like I would win competitions and I would almost sometimes feel like I couldn't celebrate just because of, I don't know why. I don't know what it is with my mentality, or whether it was just like the one thing that I used to do all the time was I would call my parents. Would be the first thing I would do. I would just pick up the phone, call my parents, my girlfriend at the time, whoever it was, the people that meant something to me. I'd pick up the phone and call them. And funnily enough, the first World Cup I ever won was in Cuba. And in Cuba, we have no cell phone reception. And so I won the competition. It was a struggle all day. It was like, so in fencing, your match goes to 15 points. The closest a match can be is 14-15, right? And that's like nail biter, exhausted match.
How long is that typically?
It depends on the person you're fencing, but a fencing match can be, it's 3-minute rounds. So it'd be about 9 minutes,
like
but you're starting and stopping the clock. So it can be much longer than that.
Okay.
So yeah, so I think so to win a competition, it's 64-32, 6 matches. I had 5 that were 15-14 matches.
Wow.
And my final match, I was down like 11-4 or something, and came back and won the World Cup against this Italian guy that I really respected, Giorgio Avola. And I finished, and like, I'm shot. Like there's very little AC. Like the place is bare bones. We're in Cuba fencing. It's an amazing place. I finished and I couldn't call anybody. I couldn't do anything. Like none of my family was there. I didn't have my own personal coach there at the time. Actually, I just had the team coach. So I didn't have like the guy who was my actual trainer with me. And it was a weird feeling because it was just about me. You know, it was just like, I did this, like I made this happen. And I think there's something about the success of that feeling that's the thing you're chasing. Like you're chasing that 4 seconds after you score the last touch. You know what I mean? And you're like, I fucking did it. Like I fucking did it. I'm in my own head. I'm celebrating because it's like, I fucking did it. Like that weight, that feeling you get, that euphoria that you get from that, no champagne shower or like picture by the pool later, or like, you know, like hanging out with the pretty Cuban girls, like nothing's gonna get you that is that 4 seconds after you score that last touch where you're like, I did it. And that's why that's that moment where you see fighters and they like look up at the sky, or like just the other, you know, day when like Khabib dropped down with all the weight of his parents and started crying, like with his father dying, like those kind of things for me are the emotions that drives athletes. The stuff that you see, the extra stuff, is just show. Like it's fun and we can all go celebrate, you know what I mean? And I love to celebrate like in that sense, but actually taking a moment to understand what you've done. And I used to say this to people all the time. Every time I hit an accomplishment, I would say I'm adding a 0. So I'm a national champion. That's 0.1% of people have ever done that. Okay, I'm a 3-time national champion. Okay, I'm like 0.01% of people have ever done that. I'm an Olympian, 0.001. Oh, I'm an Olympic medalist, 0.0001. And you keep adding to that thing. And that's the thing that even now, like saying those things, it gives me chills, makes me want to get up and do a run.
Gives me chills
it's
too.
Fucking raining, it's shitty outside, and I'm like, I want to get up and run. I want to add a zero to that thing. I want to keep chasing those things that people don't do in life. Like doing those things for me has been the goal. And it's been beautiful to, like you said, celebrate. And for me, I have trouble celebrating like that. I'll go out and have, when I'm with the guys, when we get a team win, like that's the easiest time for me to celebrate because I'm sharing it with other people. Just like you said, when they're all hyped, I'm hyped. We build off each other. We get crazy. But when it's just me, I've learned actually that it's more about celebrating each of those moments, like celebrating getting to the area. I'm in Tokyo to fight guys with a sword. I'm off the plane, like taking a second to realize that takes away from that anxiety. I'm not here to keep a title, to re-win a World Cup, to go back to back, to keep my points. I'm just here to celebrate this idea that, like, I'm fucking good at what I do and I'm going to get to display that to the world. And this is an opportunity for me to do what I do best, that I love to do. And then you're celebrating everything. It's like, I love the way my weapon feels in my hand. I love the way how the room is quiet at the beginning of the day. And as you go each round, more people show up, more spectators are there. Who's there? Who are you fighting for that day? Are your parents in the crowd? Is there someone there, your loved one? Is there a girl you're trying to impress? Whatever it is, like those beautiful moments are the things that I'll hold forever. The medals go in a drawer, man. They get dusty.
Do you live this way in all aspects of your life, where you just have to, there's only one speed, and it's typically as fast as you can go, running uphill as steep as the mountain?
And you know what? It can be, honestly, man, like a fucking nightmare outside of the sports world. Like, because for me, I get into a meeting with people, like a business meeting, and they're like, well, we need to do this, this, and this. I'm like, okay, cool, do it. Like, you know what I mean? I'm like, let's do it. And they're like, oh, well, we need to find the right person. I'm like, yeah, so let's find the right person. Let's get it. Like, let's learn how to do it. You need me to like start writing up drafts? You need me to do something? They're like, whoa, man, like slow down. We don't know if this is the final plan. We need to like mood board and do all these things. And I'm like, I'm full get. Like, I want to start right away, because my thing is that like everything takes time, but you need to begin, you need to be taking steps to reach the goals that you want to take. And then outside of sports life, you can't just go run. Like, I can't just start doing things. I can't change my eating and my sleeping pattern and start to control my weight and start to be conscious of competitions coming up and all of these things. With business stuff, it's like 6 emails to get something done. It drives me crazy sometimes. It drives me crazy. So absolutely I am. And people make fun of me for it all the time. Like, all my friends make fun of me for it all the time. They're like, oh, don't tell Race about it yet, because he'll like try to go do it. And I'll do it like not a good job, because I don't know how to do other things as well as I know how to fence.
I am the exact same way. I think we have a lot in common. If you can give a piece of advice for somebody who's listening, and I love what you said, like you just got to begin, right? Period. There's only one way. I have a little quote that I throw out there pretty often is want plus do equals have. That's it. It's just that simple. There's no other way. There's no other way to have something you want, as far as I'm concerned, without fucking doing it. There's no money that you can pay. It's just, if you want something, you just got to go. And so if there is, and you obviously are a guy who has been able to achieve more than many people that's walked the face of the planet, the things that he's wanted. So what kind of advice could you give the listener if they're staring down the barrel of something that they really want? How can they get going?
So I'll give you 2. So the first is actually a quote. So it's not even my advice. It's something that I've held on to forever. And it's from Arthur Ashe. And it was, you're never playing yourself. You're playing your own expectations. You're never playing yourself. You're playing your own greatest expectations. And when you achieve that goal, that is true joy. And I think that nowadays, with social media, with everything that's going on with kids, when people come up to me, they're aspiring to be like me, or they're aspiring to ask me questions. And very few of them will, ask me a question about like, what is it that you do this? Why do you do this? What is this kind of thing? And that's why I listen to podcasts. Like, that's why I'll go to like, I said to you before I came on this, I was like, I was listening to your show, trying to just like take little bits of information from people. And for me, you're always trying to find the best way to be the best version of yourself. And I know it sounds cheesy as hell, but you're the guy, you're the dude, you're the person who's going to win, not them beating them. Like your skills. If you hone that shit, whether you want to be a bodybuilder or a Muay Thai fighter, it doesn't matter if you're 30 years old or 16. Like it's you. You're the only roadblock. And the same thing goes for in competition, right? Like, man, I've lost to myself on the strip way more than I've lost to my opponents over the years. Way, way more. And so understanding that you're your sharpest tool and building every aspect of that out, whether it's mental, physical, emotional, balance, both in home and sport, all of that stuff is key. So that was one thing that I've definitely held with me. And then the other aspect is coaches and people are there to guide you, but you will always know the best way to find your route for yourself. And I do believe honestly that I've heard way more no's than I've heard yeses when I come up with ideas or I come up with plans or I've changed coaches or I've done this, and it's always worked out because you are the talent. A coach's job is to hone your talent. Everybody would love to work with Nadal. Everybody would love to have Federer. If you're one of those people, you're one of those people. So hone your craft and believe in yourself, and search for knowledge, but don't search for direction all the time.
Search for knowledge, but don't search for direction all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost positive I know the answer to this question, but I like to ask this question. Are you an analytical decision maker or a gut guy?
So funnily enough, one coach I had a while ago made me take a personality exam before we started working with each other. And he said I'm very, very analytical. And a couple of the trainers I worked with said I'm like ultra methodical in my training. But I feel like I'm at my best and I make decisions that other people's won't from my gut. So my big, big decisions I almost make from feeling, and my day-to-day life stuff I do very analytically.
Wow, that is unique. That is very unique.
Guess, yeah. I mean, you know what? Honestly, someone else could come on here and be like, Race doesn't know himself that well. But it's true, man. Like, I mean, when I try to do things, like I try to piece up. I'm not a good organizer, so like I'm still like a write it down kind of guy, like a notepad kind of guy. I do things old school. I like to have numbers and I like to hit my goals. So it's like if it's 2 minutes of work, we're there for 2 minutes. I like to have those little pockets of achievement. Yeah, man. Like I want to feel like I achieved something every day. Even when I have nothing going on, I look for the thing that I can go, I did this today. I accomplished this goal.
I want to take a few minutes to talk about habits, because I believe that we are our habits. I believe habits are everything. I'm launching a business called Creatures of Habit.
Nice.
Habits have absolutely 100% defined me inside and out. The people I hang out with, the good and the bad, everything I do is roughly based around my habits and the things that I structure into my day. Are there habits that you have consistently done for periods of time or for till today that you can share with us?
Well, I definitely will say that when I was before my first World Cup win, so when I started to get more serious about training, I read a book about habits. It was called, it was an orange book, something
Atomic
about
Habits.
Something along those lines. It was, one of those, a self-help book. And there's been a few books like that over my career that I've kind of connected with at critical moments. And this one was a thing about, for me, the habits that I take in the most is actually in training. So I do my warm up the same way I do it at competition every single time, like to the point where I don't know how to do it another way. Like it's the same amount of time. It's the same amount of seconds on each one. Like it's the same amount of warm up. It's the same speed. It's the same intensity every day. And that, for me, that habit is like, that's my home base. I do it here. I do it if I'm in Tokyo. I do it if I'm in the Olympic Games. I do it at the World Championships. It's always the same. And so when I start that warm up, I'm locked in. Like it's the beginning of the process for me. And then as far as training goes, I like to use training habits as a way to reflect. So I think that when you release yourself, like if you have a very strict thing, so let's say you're going into, because fencing terms will probably confuse people, but I'm sparring with an opponent, right? I'm going to work on one section, one thing. I'm going to be really dominant. I want to control their blade. I want to win as badly as I can. So like if I can win 15-0, I'm going to do so. That goal, that kind of like focus on one thing, allows some of your other habits to come out, because now I'm focused on a single thing. Like I have an objective and I want that objective. The same way you go into a competition, you want to win, right? Mm-hmm. And that's when we start to see people come out of position, drop their hands, like do things that are bad habits. And so I like to use my habits in practice to tell myself, okay, I have a coach that watches me. We write down some of the things that I did wrong, and then I make that habit the main process of my week. So like whether it's like my feet are coming too close together and I'm losing balance when I'm attacking, this week is going to be about focusing on that. This chunk of training is going to be about focusing on that until it's habitual, till I can do it over and over and over again without having to think about it. And then that gives me freedom to compete the way I want and get into that zone.
What about habits outside of your career?
Yeah, I mean, when I'm trying to be, I mean, it depends on what's going on, like food wise, I've worked with nutritionists. I've been very tight with it. I've been a little bit looser with it. I like to be, my mentality is to go further in. So I will always like go to the max. So a lot of the times I'll actually rein it in. I like to try to rein it in. So like if I'm doing, I don't like to put too many boundaries on it, because I'll live exactly by that. Like I can go months without drinking. It's not a problem for me. Like I can do it. You know what I mean? And I've done like definitely months at a time without drinking, without eating anything bad, without doing that, like being very, very controlled about it. But I think that actually, again, it comes back to that flexibility where like no training circuit is perfect. Something will go wrong. The weather will be bad. Your coach will be sick. You'll be sick. There's other things in life. There's too many things. You have to be flexible. And it's nice to kind of keep that in mind whenever you're being very habitual at home. I like to just be consistent. So like on day to day, my sleep is good. On day to day, my eating is good, right? Rather than saying, oh, I have 5 days of this and I have a cheat day. No, I mean, my cheat day will come when my cheat day comes. It's not, I don't want it to come. If it's 5 days and I'm competing on Sunday, I don't want to have my cheat day on the day before my competition. So I try to keep everything flexible, but I try to be consistent with the habits so that over in the long term, I'm being better as a whole.
Race, this was awesome, dude.
Thanks.
I've got to ask you a final question.
Yep.
Do you think you were born with an inherent ability to crush it the way you absolutely have, or you were made over time?
I think I was born with the ability to compete, and I think I was made into a champion. Yeah.
Boom.
There you go.
I like it. You're born. I believe at my core, and I've said it. I didn't say it when I first started this podcast, but I do believe everybody is born with a unique talent, and I think the journey in life is trying to find out what that talent is.
That's something that's changed a lot for me since quarantine. Like that, the response to that question in general, since like sports has been kind of taken away, where you step back from it. It is interesting to see as I'm getting older, as I'm getting further in my career, there is something about like, there's some people who have it, and there's something about the showtime. And I think the showtime thing is something that's really interesting, because I've known so many guys who are amazing at practice, like just monsters at practice, such scary dudes. Like you walk on the strip with them, you're like, this is going to suck. This is going to be hell for the next 9 minutes. Like, let's get after this. And you get to competition and it's like deer in the headlights. So definitely born. That's why I said born to compete, because I think some people are born to be in that moment. Like there's showtime people. And I love being under the lights. I love being out there and getting under the lights, man. That's like the thing that I crave more than anything. I do all of this training so I can get out there for sure.
I love it, dude. I'm honored, man. I'm honored to have you on the show. And
no, thank you. Thank you.
You've inspired me to, I'm going to pop onto YouTube and watch you kick some fucking ass. Cause
Hell
I'm
yeah,
looking forward to it.
Get in there.
Do you think that you can really like fencing and sword fighting? Like, would you just like, if you were a Game of Thrones character, would you just be crushing it?
So I definitely, I'm a stabbing weapon, but if you know, funnily enough, you know how she has in the Game of Thrones that like light sword?
Yeah.
She has that, what's it called? It's like her little dagger that she has.
Young girl.
Yeah.
That thing is pretty badass.
Definitely do some damage with. that little one-handed light thing. Oh yeah. Definitely do some damage with 100%. Anything. It's funny because I just took my first Muay Thai class during lockdown.
Oh, really?
We went out and I was doing, there were some guys that I knew, they doing Muay Thai classes out under the highway out here doing open air classes. And I went out and did some Muay Thai classes. And it's hilarious for me because like, we're so one hand dominant. So like and I told them, I was like, look, I'll do everything, but I'm standing with my dominant hand forward because in fencing, it's the one thing I don't want to fuck with, you know?
Yeah.
And I came out and was just like jabbing away, but my hooks were just god awful. And I was like, oh man, this is
but you want to know something really. So are you a righty or a lefty?
I'm a lefty.
You're a lefty. So you would be a southpaw.
Yep.
And so, but you stand in fencing, you stand with your left, you stand with your left hand forward.
Dominant hand is forward. Yeah.
So, you know, for me, my absolute number one most deadly combination is jab, front hand hook. So like in Muay Thai, you don't really throw that backhand hook unless you're like really inside. You're a tall guy, no?
Yeah.
So you're not really throwing that right hand hook or that rear hand hook. You're throwing that lead hand hook. So like the flick of the wrist is really what the jab is. That's it.
Yep.
It's not really, you're not really trying to hurt anybody. You're just trying to
pop them.
And then boom, you come in with that lead hand hook. You're killing, man.
I loved it, man. I was shocked. Like for me, it's amazing. It's amazing when you use different muscles because like my muscles are all like built for fencing now. It's like I can sit in fencing stands all day. The second I started throwing kicks, I was like, man, this is exhausting to like just pick your leg up 40 times and just kick somebody. I was like, this is exhausting, but it was fucking fun as shit. Like
so much fun, man. Yeah, it's so much fun. A pleasure, dude. I really appreciate it. And
thank you.
Let's connect when this whole thing is over. You know, New York is in my heart. I never thought I'd leave New York City, but you know, I'm about 2 hours north, and I've been up here for a while, and it looks like we're staying here for some time.
I think everybody's we're gonna go into lockdown again soon, but
I wouldn't doubt it. All right, man. Stay healthy, stay safe. Thank you so much. Keep crushing and showing us how it's done. It's incredible, man. You know, I wish you all the luck in the world. I don't think you need it, but keep inspiring us, dude.
Thank you, man. Peace, guys. Thank you for having me.
What's up, guys? That was my conversation with Race Imboden. Wow, what an inspirational dude. World champion a number of times over, Olympic medalist, just World Cup win. I mean, the guy has just an enormous amount of accolade in his career. And he's such a cool dude too. And I love the fact that he's a Brooklyn kid, which is just, it's not something that I would have imagined for a champion fencer. I mean, the guy's a world champion. He dropped so many incredible gems for us to take with us today. After listening to this podcast or after being the host of the podcast, I am incredibly inspired. I really, there were so many things that he said, that we're going to chop up and share with you all, just because I feel like, you know, speaking to a world champion and asking him, I think my favorite part of the podcast is really talking to him about celebration. Because I do think as a competitor, you know, stopping to smell the roses and stopping to celebrate is something that should happen. And I know for me, I mean, I'm a really competitive guy, and in business, in fitness, and all that stuff, I really need to be reminded that, like, you know what, man, it's okay to celebrate every once in a while. And so I really loved that we spent a fair amount of time talking about celebrating. So if you're listening to this, remember to fucking celebrate. Celebrate the wins in your own way, but really celebrate the wins, because life is long. I do believe that. I'm not one of these guys that says life is short. I believe life is long, but we should be celebrating the wins. And Race was a win for me to have him on the podcast today. So I'm going to celebrate. Anyway, thanks guys. Thanks for listening in. Again, I love you. I appreciate you. Share the podcast. You guys rock. This thing is growing. I'm really excited about it. And I can't wait to continue with next week. Peace.